Well, 2014 already looks like a newsy year. Our old Florida governor is challenging our new one. In Brevard, a major corruption case could go to trial or end in plea deals. And a proposed tax for Brevard schools will compete with voters' attention, along with a possible statewide referendum to approve medical marijuana. Joining me today to preview the year for the Space Coast is my friend Bill Mick, the conservative host of the top-rated Bill Mick Live on WMMB, 1240 AM. Take a look. All right, Bill, let's take some turns identifying some issues or some news developments that we expect to have happen in 2014. Why don't you go first?
Big picture, some of the biggest things I see happening will have to do with the elections, both in the primary and the general as we get to them next fall. That's an opportunity to see real change on a county commission, for example, where 2 seats are up for grabs. You elect the right 2 people in those seats, and you change the complexion and the tone of this county commission. You change how this county commission does business. I think that's going to be important. I think we've got 1, maybe 2 great candidates in District 4. I only see 1 good candidate in District 2, although you take a look at those and you're going to see 3 or 4 names and some of them familiar. Well, in District 4 right now you've got 9 names in, only 2 that I think are viable. And we'll see where that's going to go. I think that'll make a difference for the county.
Well, how do you suppose the change in membership on those boards, county commission, could change the direction or the types of policies that people are set?
Well, what you've got in play right now is a county commission that's led by the only Democrat on the commission in Robin Fisher. He is the lead dog on the commission. He is the strongest member of that commission by far. His only opposition in reality is Trudy Infantini, who is just as strong but no support on the other side of the political spectrum. You elect 2 conservatives to this board in these 2 districts, and you see Trudy Infantini and those 2 conservatives actually change how the county does business. And you will see a more fiscally responsible commission, one that will require more accountability, more transparency, and a better idea of what we're doing with our tax dollars. You'll see a commission that won't try to involve itself in school board issues for whimsical reasons.
Probably less in terms of rules for properties, I'm thinking,
yeah,
for,
absolutely.
Unincorporated areas like they did with the trucks. I guess it was the step trucks, that people's work trucks, food trucks, plumbing trucks, the kinds of things that probably nobody notices their minds if it's out in Canaveral Groves or some parts of unincorporated areas, but Merritt Island, they didn't necessarily want things like that. Also, I'm picturing...
yeah, why not be proud you've got working, successful people in your neighborhood? Why don't you want that plumber having his work truck available if he gets the call at 2 in the morning? I guarantee you want him to have the truck if it's your house.
Well, now there are small stores that are opening in trucks as well. You might see some fashion trucks and that kind of thing. So maybe having a plan, you know, not just don't do that, but here's what you can do also. Might be the best way to go. Also, I'm thinking economic development, you know, and how the county commission handles that. What kinds of disclosure, what kinds of incentives they're willing to extend, under what circumstances. That might make a big difference.
You know, through the last quarter of 2013, we talked a lot about economic development issues and the county commission on the show. And that relationship between the Brevard County Commission and the EDC appears to me to be almost, if not downright incestuous, that some of the dealings going on there, if you're not part of the good old boy network, you're not getting anything done business-wise in Brevard. And the EDC and the County Commission working almost hand in hand, to the point that if you are not greasing those skids, you're not getting anything done. It sends a bad message. There's a cloud over Brevard business right now. We want to say we want to draw jobs here, but you've got to be able to play ball. Most recently, and just yesterday at the County Commission meeting, and we don't know the results of that as we're recording this today, but they discussed the MC Assembly move potential to Melmerd from Palm Bay. The idea that if he didn't get tax incentives, he was taking those 540 jobs to Mexico,
right,
which would be more profitable for his business anyway. There are other reasons he wants to stay in Brevard, but he said, and you can't argue with MC Assembly on this, with any other business locating in Brevard, they're throwing out tax abatements like crazy. Do they not value the businesses that are already here? And he's saying, if you want me to keep my jobs here, give me the tax breaks you're giving everybody else. You can't blame the business owner for the bad environment the EDC and the County Commission have created when it comes to taxes on business in this county.
Well, transparency would certainly help, and that's my first issue that I'm looking ahead on in 2014, and that does involve the Economic Development Commission. On January 29th, they're due to go to trial in a challenged by Clerk of Court Scott Ellis to have their records opened up and made public. Scott is seeking records related to Blueware, that computer and software, computer document scanning company that got into so much trouble here in the past year. Scott says that those records ought to be made public so that he can go through and find out who knew what when, I suppose, and he's trying to get that contract invalidated, so this information might help with that, might at least be relevant to that. The EDC is making the argument that, well, we're not a government entity, we haven't taken on all of the public function of economic development, so really a private nonprofit, and you don't get the records.
If that's the case, they need to give back the $1.4 million that they get from the county commission every year to operate. They need to get their employees off of the county's benefits rolls where they are eligible for those county insurance benefits and the like. They are trying to have it both ways.
Right.
Now, this contract, whether it was secret or not, as far as had to be kept confidential with the people who were working the contract at the time, which was the then Clerk of Courts, Mitch Needleman. That contract is now left to be administered by Clerk of Courts Scott Ellis. That was not a personal contract with Needleman, although his personal benefit from it's what got him and Rose Haar and Matt Dupree arrested. That was a contract with the Clerk of Court's office. Scott is the administrator of that office. If anybody ought to see him, it ought to be Scott Ellis, and it should have been done, what, 6-8 months ago. Not being done now.
Right.
Needs to be accomplished.
Well, I can tell you from Florida Today's perspective, we generally support freedom of information, generally support disclosure. I've been a critic of the Economic Development Commission's secrecy. They see the secrecy as being a tool of the trade. I'm concerned, depending on what happens at trial, that we might wind up with a ruling if Scott Ellis loses, that nobody can go see records from then. It becomes precedent setting in some way, and it winds up setting us back.
That's a legitimate concern. I don't think it goes that way for the simple reason I think the law sets on the side of Scott Ellis and the clerk's office. Now, if you're talking about secrecy in luring a company here, there are good reasons why a company in Ohio or Michigan or California may not want information out that it's looking to come to Brevard County. I understand secrecy there, but when you're going to an elected body and asking them for tax breaks for a company, that elected body ought to have the ability to sign on the line and say, I'll keep it secret too, but I'm not telling you yes on tax abatements till I know what's going on.
Right.
That was the whole Embraer situation with Project Jaguar. They took a pig in the poke to the county commission saying, we've got a great company, we need you to give them tax abatements and we're going to give them money in advance, so go ahead and say yes and then we're going to bring these jobs here. Thank God it ended up working out okay. Embraer seems to be fulfilling what they said they were going to do. They're doing a great job over at the Melbourne airport. They've got jobs in play, but wrong-minded to vote yes when you don't know what you're voting on. It's not what we elect our representatives to do for us.
Yeah, and I just don't know what, in the end, I'm not sure what the extreme secrecy accomplished there. You've got a big
it's a power base
like
for Linda Weatherman and that EDC board, and they want to maintain their power base.
You're right. Embraer, speaking of which, Embraer's looking at opening a second assembly line here in the Melbourne airport. No question that some of these businesses and the manufacturing and design and everything else that has been achieved through some of this isn't a good idea. In fact, I think we're looking at some home construction picking up to serve the people that are going to be working in those areas. So it's not necessarily the ends, but it is the means that I think maybe taxpayers deserve a little bit more disclosure and transparency, because it might help deal with that cloud that you're talking about.
Absolutely, because that's bad right now. Absolutely.
What else are you seeing in the 2015?
Well, while we're talking the EDC and those issues, let's go ahead and go to the Needleman trial.
Okay.
You've got Mitch Needleman, you've got his right-hand man and business partner for a long time between the legislature and becoming the clerk of courts, Matt Dupree, who was really the linchpin and who put all of this stuff together based on the information that I've gleaned from your reports in Florida today and what was sent out by the state's attorney's office as the discoverable information was released. Dupree was the linchpin in all this, and he put all this together. And you've got Rose Haar, the owner of Blue Gem Blueware, and that trial could go a long way towards setting public policymakers back on the right track in Brevard County, maybe across the state, as you have an elected official who clearly, at least on how I see the evidence, acted for his own personal benefit in how he handled these contracts, how he handled these dollars, and funneling that business to Blueware. There may be a Source 2 issue that comes out of this, who knows? And the EDC involvement in that is ugly. And here they're playing hide the pickle again. They're wanting to be secret about all of that. I think that's going to be a big news story in 2014. And what happens there? Will Rose Har or Matt Dupree or Mitch Needleman reach a plea agreement and then start talking about what the others' roles were? There are already rats jumping off of the sinking ship from Needleman's administration in the clerk's office. They've already signed the deals. They've already told the state's attorney what's going on. There will be convictions here. The question is anybody that's left of these top 3 players going to be smart enough to get a plea deal and get the best deal they can, or are they going to go to trial and face something pretty severe?
I think there's a strong chance of conviction in this case. Either way, I was very happy to see Phil Archer, the new state attorney as of 2012, pursue this case in a more aggressive fashion than I think it might have been pursued under his predecessor. And it was also really good to see, once the records were disclosed, the kind of police work that went into this and the investigation and the degree of cooperation that some of the people inside government were willing to give. I think what we've seen in this case, and it's illustrative of others, is that the biggest potential source of danger is you've got these lobbyists who are out there, who are friends. They get paid to open doors for private companies. They have
which is what Dupree's career was, absolutely.
That can be done in an up-and-up way. But if you get a public official who treats that office like it's a fiefdom and sees that there are millions of dollars in contracts for this, that, or the other thing, whether it's software, scanning documents, maybe it's transporting prisoners, something like that. Those are all private contracts that some people don't know about. There isn't a lot of sunshine on those things. The potential for milking those contracts for money and kickbacks and those kinds of things is tremendous. And that is where I think taxpayers need to be most on their toes, and it's why I'm so glad to see somebody taking corruption in that area so seriously this year.
Phil Archer deserves a commendation for how this has been handled thus far. That's true, and I agree with you. Historically, that would not have been the case in Brevard County. It was one of the biggest frustrations I had. If you don't have the integrity to take a look at those people who are serving, maybe not necessarily with you, but in a similar capacity, if you don't have the integrity to conduct that investigation and prosecute where it's warranted, regardless of who it is, then you don't have any business being in the job. And I'm glad to see that out of the state's attorney's office. I think that's phenomenal.
I think that one of the issues that is going to be coming up this year that we'll be watching, I know a lot of other people will be too, is this issue of a sales tax to help fund school repairs and capital needs and that kind of thing. Not only is it going to be interesting to see whether that passes and how the campaign goes, but the consequences, if it doesn't pass, could be pretty severe. I mean, the school board has said if it doesn't pass, there will be schools discussed for closure, as well as other types of operating cuts that need to be made in order to make that money go into the repairs and things that in the places that it really needs to go. What's your take on its chances this year?
Right now, if I had to call it, I would say slim and none. The voters don't trust the school board. They don't trust the administration. They don't trust the way they've seen spending done in the past. They don't trust the messaging. That's probably the biggest problem the school board and the administration have, is that they're not good at messaging the issues. They don't spell them out clearly. They've already stated that they are taking, for now, the similar steps they took to the last time a tax increase vote failed for the schools. We're not going to tell you which schools may be on the chopping block, and if we let you think all the schools are on the chopping block, you're going to think yours is in jeopardy and you're going to vote for a tax. Didn't work then, not going to work now. They are not getting the message out very well at all. Get it that they are, by law, not allowed to campaign, yet on every marquee at every school you see things about the tax vote. So let's be honest, it happens. And they need someone who can message for them if they expect it to pass. Just had County Commissioner Trudy Infantini on the show last Friday. Something she told me that is going to weigh in on this that the voters didn't know until Friday is that the County Commission is going to hike stormwater usage fees, the fire fee in Brevard County. They're moving to increase those. They'll talk about it in County Commission meetings in the very near future. And they are trying to implement those increases before the school board vote goes in front of the public, so their tax increases are done. And could that undermine the chances of a school tax increase passing? I think it's a factor. I don't know how big it is, but it is a factor in that.
Well, the key to that decision, I think, on the public's behalf it goes back to what you just mentioned a second ago, and that was, will there be somebody really running a campaign in favor of this tax. Last year, last year, 2012, there were information sessions. The superintendent and some others went around with PowerPoint projectors and had information about school finances, and they did plenty of those, but by law, they couldn't make the ask, so to speak. They couldn't say, please vote for this.
Did anybody wonder what they were doing? I don't think so, whether they made the ask or not.
But what they didn't do is this. They didn't get out to the people who weren't already stakeholders in the schools. They were speaking to parents. They were speaking to teachers. In some cases, they were speaking to extended families, but they weren't talking to business people or the 4 out of 5 households that don't have kids in the system today. And those are the people that need to be persuaded that it would be in their best interest somehow, or at least charitable or appeal to them in some fashion to go ahead and approve this, because it's not insignificant. It is a significant issue and a significant cost.
Here's the best advice I can give the schools and the school board as they go for this tax increase. Take the microphone away from Brian Bingley, take it away from Barbara Murray, take it away from Michael Krupp. You threaten me again as a voter, and I'm going to vote no just because you've ticked me off. Stop threatening me of how bad it's going to be if you don't get your way. Stop talking down to me as a voter. You're the elected puke or you're the appointed puke, and you'll do the job we've told you to do. It's not up to you to threaten me, and I'm sick and tired of it, and I know a lot of my listeners are. Talk to me in calm tones that tell me what your real needs issues are. Show me where the problems have been and what you've done to ensure that those problems aren't going to come again if we give you this money. You have a chance if you do that. If not, not going to happen. And those 3 folks that I mentioned have no business talking to the public about this issue, because every time they've done it so far, it's been in a threatening tone, and that ain't going to fly.
I think that if they're going to make a positive argument and they're going to appeal to people who are generally fiscally conservative in this county, it has to be that, look, we have these obligations. Past regimes came in, they issued bonds for schools, they did issued debt for schools. We have obligations. We need to honor them. We need to make our debt payments, and we need to fix the schools. And we're asking you to help us out with that. It's not the do this or we'll close your school. I don't think that's going to work.
Well, and by and large, the people I talk to every day don't see school closures as a punishment. They see it as a necessary fiscal measure. When you lose the population Brevard lost since 2005, 2006, somewhat 5,000 students, if I remember correctly, it's time to close some schools. You can argue over where, you can argue over which districts, and Robin Fisher can scream race all he wants to, can scream poverty all he wants to, but when those schools are underfed by the population of that neighborhood, it's time to close those schools. So make common sense decisions. My audience didn't mind schools being closed. We were spending money we didn't need to spend.
Well, the school board obviously came up with the plans to close the school, and they suffered the blowback from the community, or at least some portions of it. So it just goes to show what a fraught issue that is, and what stakes are at play in that particular vote in 2014.
Very true.
What else is on your list?
I'm interested in seeing what happens with the John Morgan drug problem. For a year now.
This would be the hoped for ballot initiative to legalize medical marijuana.
Exactly.
Okay.
And for a year now, in my show and others across WMMB, the only commercials, it seems, we've heard from John Morgan is, sign my petition to legalize marijuana. You're an angel and we need your angel votes. He's having trouble getting to the signature level. They've collected over the signature amount, but anytime you're in a petition drive, there are duplicates. There are people signing petitions who aren't eligible to sign because they're not registered voters. There's a long verification process that has to happen in each of the supervisor of elections offices. One of my concerns, and I haven't been able to chase it down, is just a couple of weeks ago, over the holidays, John Morgan was on our public affairs show on Saturday morning on WMMB, and he said some of the large county supervisors were helping him in that regard with the petition drives. Well, the county supervisors, and I talked to Lori Scott about this, are there to enforce, to follow, and to implement the law as it's been written by the legislature. They're not there to help any cause or anything else. So I'd like to know from John Morgan just exactly what are some of these large county supervisors doing to help his cause, because there could be a violation there that if this thing would get on the ballot, there would be a problem and it might need to go away. I don't think it passes in this state. I think Florida's too conservative a state to do that. I think if they, and I, as an ex-drug cop, I'm anti-marijuana, but I also would concede that if there is that terminal cancer patient or somebody else who could benefit from smoking marijuana, I don't care. But if you want it to be medicinal marijuana, true medicinal marijuana, have a physician prescribe it, have it distributed through a pharmacy like anything else you're going to take on a prescription. If that's not what this petition is about, then it's simply a cover for trying to legalize dope, and that's not a good thing.
I think that I'm a little surprised that they haven't been able to get the signatures that they need, given that there is a lot of money that John Morgan is bringing to the table here. And so often, the people that are trying to get these issues on the ballot simply hire professional companies to go out and get them. I wonder if maybe their petition gatherers are maybe a little stoned and moving a little slower.
Interesting, you should bring that up.
Or not, but we haven't endorsed on this issue. We haven't come out in favor or against medical marijuana. However, we do support at least giving the people the chance to vote on it. Like you, I'm a little bit skeptical that 60% of Florida voters would approve that. I do see some potential down the road, given that medical marijuana is, at least what we've seen in terms of it being great for different types of epilepsy and that sort of thing, is the stuff that's low in THC, the stuff that gets you stoned, and high in these other things that they derive these oils from that can be truly medicinal. My thought is, why not see if the University of Florida can develop us a form of low THC hemp, that we can use for industrial purposes but also serves a medicinal thing. But that's not what people really want.
It could be the Gatorade of the 20-teens, couldn't it? My problem, and I get that you want the people to decide, but this is not a constitutional issue. We shouldn't legislate through the Constitution. The Constitution is a form and function document of government, and that's all it should be. Because we have this constitutional amendment process, it's been perverted through the years to bring in law on pretty much like the referendum system they have in your native California. Not a system I like at all. And we shouldn't change the Constitution. This is a legislative issue. It should be deliberated by our elected officials and let them put in the law what is reasonable for the state of Florida. And if it is truly medical, I get it. Take a look at the medical marijuana facilities in California. They are nothing but fronts for heavy marijuana and other drug sales. And I saw it in my time in Modesto when I was there. This is a false flag issue, if you will. It's medical marijuana. That's not what they're looking for.
No, I think it is opening the door to just basically
Absolutely.
the Starbucks for stoners, or just down the road like what Colorado has, which is just you build tolerance for it, no pun intended, socially, and then and then eventually it turns into a broader sort of legalization effort. Which, okay, I haven't decided whether I'm in favor of that at all, but the medical marijuana part, I do want to be able to see people who have a legitimate need for something that can be extracted from marijuana. I'd like to see that happen. But
even the ex-drug cop doesn't mind
that. The Starbucks for stoners, I'm not sure.
Exactly. I like that phrase. I'm going to steal it.
The other thing that's coming up this year that I'm looking forward to is the Charlie Crist, Rick Scott gubernatorial race. Speaking of John Morgan, I guess Charlie Crist is coming at this election as a John Morgan law partner or former law partner and a trial lawyer with all of the usual Democratic talking points. What do you make of that race?
Any wonder why the John Morgan billboards in Tallahassee all have Charlie Crist's picture on them, not John Morgan's?
Well, he's the people's governor, or was.
Yeah, so they say. If this race ends up being Charlie Crist as the Democrat and Rick Scott as the Republican, Rick Scott is the presumptive nominee. We haven't had any conservative Republicans step up to run against him, which I would like to see, but it hadn't happened yet, and I don't think it will. I think there's a question as to whether or not Crist is the actual nominee. He was governor immediately prior to Rick Scott. He was a Republican when he was governor. He wasn't a good Republican, but he was a Republican. I was ripping him and Jim Greer from the time I got back here in 2000 until the time he was out of office. He was a very poor Republican governor, raising taxes, raising fees, those kind of things, with the help of Brevard Senator Thad Altman. And Charlie Crist does not have credibility with all of the Democrats in the state. If Bill Nelson throws his hat in this ring, he will be the nominee and he will be the next governor. If not, I think Rick Scott is by default a second-term governor if Charlie Crist is the nominee.
I think a big factor in this is going to be money. If you look at what's going on with the fundraising already, Rick Scott is raising money hand over fist. The checks that are being cut and the amounts that are being asked for in these invitations that are going on for the $1,000 a plate dinners or so forth is pretty astronomical, going into the not his personal campaign accounts, but these PACs that run ads on there. The TV campaign here is going to be a bloodbath. It's going to be ugly. We're all going to want to turn off our TVs probably by November, but probably sooner than that, actually, given how much voting is happening early, how much voting is happening by absentee ballots. I suspect that probably by September, we'll start seeing heavy airplay. Those dollars are going to be going to someplace, and I think winning the TV war is going to be the big one. And both of these candidates have weird paths. You know, they have political baggage that they carry that can be criticized, and they're going to exploit every dollar they can raise to defining their opponents. So I look for a pretty ugly race, and I couldn't predict at this point how it's going to turn out.
Yeah, and like I said, if Bill Nelson gets in, it's a done deal. Nelson's your next governor.
Do you really think he's going to run?
Don't know. Rumor has it he would like to do that, but Mrs. Nelson likes D.C. Who knows? We'll see where it goes. And if he gets his hat in the ring, he's the nominee and he's the next governor. If he doesn't, Rick Scott by default, regardless of how ugly it gets. Charlie Crist will say anything to anyone if he thinks it will get him a vote. He's proven that during his term as a Republican governor. He will do it as a Democrat candidate, and he's already done so.
Well, I think he would be, if he's elected, I think he'll be more populist than liberal, so the Democrats might be a little bit disappointed, but we'll see how that turns out. Bill Mick, good luck in the year ahead.
It'll be an interesting year, my friend.
Good to talk to you. Well, what do you think? As always, you can let me know in an email. Send it to letters@floridatoday.com. Meanwhile, listen for Bill Mick weekday mornings from 6 to 9 on WMMB. That's at 12:40 a.m. or 1350 in North Brevard. I join Bill to break down local news every Thursday mornings from 8 to 9 a.m. I'm Matt Reed. We'll see you right here next week on WEFS and FloridaToday.com.